Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're doing something today that's a little further down the timeline from when I usually go. We're looking at 1999's Tom Strong #1 from Alan Moore, and I roped Jay in on this one. How you doing, Jay?
Doing good.
So, the whole America's Best Comics thing was it's kind of fascinating era. This is, like I said, 1999. Um, at this time, Alan Moore has mostly rehabilitated his reputation, I'd say, because there was a long period where he wasn't doing much. He wasn't doing anything that was really big on the comics landscape, I would say. I guess I should probably just start with like a little bit of backstory on Alan Moore. I feel like I've touched on it before, but fuck it, let's do it. So, in North American comics, Alan Moore busts on the landscape with Swamp Thing, and that wins all sorts of awards, and just turns the whole thing from kind of a superhero comic with a bit of a horror overtone, and amps up the horror elements and makes it much more literate. And then from there, he does Watchmen, and which is a freaking atom bomb, and really puts his name out there as one of the major talents in terms of writing. After that, he brings over V for Vendetta, which was one of the earliest things he'd done in comics. DC acquired the rights from Warrior and published them under Vertigo. That does very well. He does The Killing Joke, which, so there's this line of like 4 years where he's doing all of these very bleak, but very well received comic stories. I kind of lost track there for a second.
Well, and I could say, I think he got a lot of press for both Moore and Frank Miller at that time. If you think about that era, 86, 87, they both got a lot of press for sort of making comics, taking superhero material and making it more adult oriented, more, sort of like literary, more serious. And I mean, we can talk a little bit about this, but I wrote an essay about this a couple of years ago, and one of the I wrote an essay specifically about The Killing Joke, and I kind of felt it was a bit of a dead end for Moore, and that I said at the time I felt like he had sort of like they had dialed up the darkness so much that it sort of got stuck, and it influenced a whole generation of comic artists, right? Like Watchmen, Rorschach in particular, like that super cynical, almost nihilistic archetype. It
kind of took away that the childlike element for one thing, which is kind of comics' lifeblood. Like the whole deal with comics, the retail outlets, all the LCSs, they support the whole system, but the main deal with comics was it was made for kids.
Yeah.
And like picking it up off the newsstand. They sold hundreds of thousands of copies of most comics because of the whole newsstand deal, and because they were completely family friendly, and everybody wanted to get on board with the new everything is so dark and bleak kind of outlook. And it influenced comics kind of for good, really, but you can draw a straight line from Watchmen, Killing Joke, straight through to like Image, with that whole nihilistic outlook. Just everything's kind of got to be more serious, got to have a more grounded kind of base, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, as I think, don't get me wrong, I think like Watchmen and Miracle Man and Swamp Thing, I think those are remarkable books, but I do think I think a lot of artists took some of the wrong lessons from those books, and that's not necessarily Moore's fault or a Frank Miller's fault, but
no, that happens all the time, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you take the most marketable lessons, which aren't necessarily the most, I don't know.
Not maybe the substance. A lot of them took the style over the substance,
Yes.
So again, someone like Rorschach, I think, influenced a lot of comic writing for years to come, and that wasn't necessarily a good thing.
Well, no, and I mean, like Rorschach he's a homeless guy who's mentally unstable and has, and basically can't function. And it's like this is our new heroes are. Yeah, this is what we pattern everything on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So what was your relationship to Tom Strong like when the ABC line came out? I seem to recall I was like well out of comics at that point. I
Yeah,
think you were still more connected in, and
somewhat.
I have this memory that you were sort of bringing the good news, like, oh, Moore's back. He's doing, he dabbled in Image for a bit, and he wrote, and the 1963 books were maybe a kind of precursor to this, like really bringing back
Yes.
that innocence and fun. But that was a relatively short-lived project, and so
And truncated.
yeah. But I remember when this ABC line kind of, was sort of emerged out of the ashes of Image. I remember you were talking about it. I think I wound up borrowing all these, your Tom Strongs and your Prometheus, and I loved this stuff when it just felt like after the decade of nihilism, it felt like such a breath of fresh air.
Well, yeah, I mean, at that time, I wasn't buying too many comics anymore, I don't think. Like, I go down to I think I work downtown, so I'd stop by there, once or twice a week. No, once or twice a month. That's what I was going for. And I'd pick up like 3 or 4 comics, maybe. And, a lot of it was like indie stuff. Like, I was still buying Cerebus. I was, whatever black and white thing I could find occasionally at the Silver Snail. Not as much there as would have been at like the Hairy Tarantula or something, but and yeah, and I was completely out of mainstream stuff. There was nothing of interest whatsoever because it was all that, it was that post-Image look, and it was that post Alan Moore, Frank Miller writing style where everything is kind of cynical, and we're not really about having fun anymore. And it's like, well, why would I want to read it then? These are dumb comic book characters for the most part. I don't want to read about Superman's cynical journeys. It's ridiculous. I'm trying to remember what it would have been like. It really was like, oh, thank God I've got some comics to buy again. I remember that.
Yeah.
Where, it was getting pretty bleak. I'd go down to the store. I wouldn't see anything I wanted to read because, like, everything was Marvel or DC for the most part. A lot of the indies had died out at that point.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, I don't want to read that kind of crap. And then Alan Moore all of a sudden comes out with, like, 4 or 5 brand new titles where he's writing all of them. And they're drawn by guys like Chris Sprouse, or I think Gene Ha was doing top 10. Not necessarily guys I was 100% familiar with, but guys who were definitely very good. And, he's got like different takes on all sorts of, it's not like it's all superhero stuff. Every book had a different feel. It was really exciting.
I think he had a lot of ideas stored up because I think I think Moore got sick of superheroes shortly after the Killing Joke era. And he embarked on From Hell and Lost Girls and Big Numbers and all these, like, really sort of literary projects that were not like Men in Tights. And so there's just like an overflowing energy in of ideas in just even this first issue of Tom Strong there's so much packed into it, but it doesn't feel dense. It just, you can tell there's a sense of release or something.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think a big part of that is in response to his parting with DC. Because, like Watchmen, the end of that comes out in 87. He's still working for DC for the next couple of years under the misconception that once Watchmen falls out of print, he's going to get control of those characters. He'll have creator control, right? That was the deal that he had with DC. And the problem is that in 1987, that's around the time that trade paperbacks started becoming commercially viable. So all of a sudden, we've got this big collection of this friggin' masterpiece that everybody wants to read, and we can just keep printing copies of that in perpetuity. And that's what they did. And so they never gave up control of the characters. And Alan Moore's like, all right, well, good job. You tricked me on that one. Good for you. I'm never working for you again. And he went off and did a whole bunch of indie stuff for the next few years. Big, the Small Killing. Well, he did Lost Girls. He did From Hell.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. And he just kind of puttered around the edges of comics for a while. And I think, like everybody was aware that Alan Moore was doing some very interesting stuff, just nobody was really seeing it. And I think that's kind of how it stayed until 1963, when the Image creators brought him on board. I was rewatching the interview with Rob Liefeld on Cartridge's Kayfabe, and he was saying how, when Rob Liefeld was offering him work, Alan Moore's just like, I'm just so glad my phone is ringing, right?
Yeah.
So I get the impression that, he shut down DC and didn't want anything to do with anything superhero for the next couple of years. And I think probably DC kind of blacklisted him, saying he's impossible to work with. He's, just don't hire this guy.
Yeah.
I think there's a good likelihood of that. So yeah, and then next few years, he starts working for Liefeld. Liefeld's paying him good money, paying him like $20,000 a week for 2 scripts every week,
Crazy.
according to that interview, which is great. Good for him. And he's doing Supreme, which is also very much in that 1963 Tom Strong kind of vein, where he's basically he's writing Superman, like 60s, 70s Superman, and like a really good version of it. And winning he's winning Eisners and Eagle Awards, and, kind of rebuilding his name and rebuilding his brand, basically, right?
Yeah.
And then in 99, he starts coming out with ABC. Apparently ABC, like America's Best Comics, was previously an imprint in the 40s. So he bought the rights to it, which is interesting.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. And also interestingly, around that time, he's like, I guess a good chunk of this video is going to just be history. So apologies for that, I suppose. But so him and Rob Liefeld are starting to have a break, where Rob's having his whole thing where Awesome, I guess it would have been Maximum, is falling out from under him. And he has to rebrand it as Awesome Comics later on. But like basically he's losing money on all his comics now, and he can't afford to keep paying Alan Moore $20,000 every week for scripts. So Alan Moore goes and negotiates a deal with Jim Lee and Homage Studios, or Wildstorm. I guess they're Wildstorm at that point. And they're going to do this whole ABC thing with like 4 or 5 brand new titles, and it's going to be done that way. And right when the lines are about to be released, Jim Lee goes and sells Wildstorm to DC because, like, he's not in comics anymore. His duties as a publisher and as like a family guy, he doesn't want to be spending long hours over a drawing table anymore. And he's like, fuck it, I'm just going to sell the rights. And DC was the one that won the bids. And somewhere along the lines, he found out that Alan Moore didn't like DC very much, and had to tell him, okay, well, sorry, man, but like DC is going to be paying your checks from now on. And Alan Moore apparently just kind of went, well, I guess that's how it is. The quote from him was like, what was it? Better to have gone back on a principle than not to have had any principles at all.
Yeah.
Which is like, all right. How much of it was that, and how much of it was that I like these checks? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, I've got this whole friggin' ambitious line set up. Everything's in place. I've got all these people ready to get employed. Do I really back out? Because, DC are dicks?
Yeah, I wouldn't fault him for that at all. Like, he didn't,
No.
I think he went off on his own for a decade and pursued, these indie projects, and, was sold out from under him. Like, how was he supposed to know? So I wouldn't begrudge him,
No, not really. But I mean, I guess it's just a little bit ironic considering, like,
Yeah,
Alan Moore's a guy
sure.
who very much, will stick by his principles and has largely had the ability to do that because of his name. But how much of that name is also built by the whole America's Best Comics thing, which was published by DC. Anyway, I suppose we should get into Tom Strong now.
Let's read a few pages of this thing.
Why not?
But listen, if you flip right to it, to the first page, unless you have some other preamble.
Not really. I probably preambled enough.
This I love your preamble. Just the opening few panels, that little repeated, almost like an animation where the letter sort of squirms through the opening. It's with the little clat flunt sound effects, the flat colors, the cartoon. It's just so not what you would necessarily have expected from an Alan Moore comic. Right from the opening page, it's it's just a new era.
This doesn't, at the very least, it's not starting like a shot across the bow or anything. Which you might have expected.
Yeah. Although in its own way, this is a radical opening. It's this little frame story, right? About a member, this kid who's joined the Tom Strong fan club. And it's sort of a lovely, you get the cover reproduced in the panel, but it's sort of a delightful, it's just such a fun, fresh opening for a comic after. So, when you think about his history and what he's known for, it's like he's immediately, in some ways it is kind of a salvo. It's sort of a radical move to have this cartoony opening, and you're going to have this kid who's almost going to be like a surrogate for us, right? Who sort of reflects the innocence that has been so,
missing,
lost,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, he's kind of a placeholder character for the reader. And you can kind of boil it down to this bottom panel down here where we're looking right over his shoulder at all this great stuff he's getting by becoming one of the strong men of America, his new package that's arrived for him, and he can't wait to read. I'll flip that over. So this is going to be set in, I believe it's Millennium City. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
All right. And okay, we're not getting a credit. Oh, credits are on the next page, I think. All right. But this is going to be drawn by Chris Sprouse, who I think had really made a name for himself when he was doing the Supreme comic for Alan Moore. He's got an extremely clean and stylish, style. I've always liked it, but I've never been able to 100% commit to how much I like it. I think because it's always felt a little sterile to me. I mean, he also very much digs this cartoony kind of element as well. I think he drew cartoons and stuff for his school newsletter, so he had a bit of practice at that. But it's extremely, it's the kind of thing that's perfectly realized.
Yeah,
where it feels like he's perfected this particular style.
It's interesting because there's not a lot of it reminds me a little bit of the Batman animated series, and Alex Toth, where there's not a lot of noodling, but he puts a sort of the bare minimum he just gives you the lines you need.
Yes.
And it's impressive because when you have so few lines, there's nowhere to hide, right? This is not.
No, that's a good call.
When I look at this stuff, I'm like, man, he's just, my inclination would be to hatch and because, things would be not in the right proportion but he's really, the lines are just, they're it's very solid. And
it seems like he has a very clear idea of what he wants to draw when he sits down to the page.
Yeah.
I don't imagine he's making very many mistakes, having to do a ton of erasing.
No.
Which is the kind of thing I'd really like to be able to do, but
I like it. I like his art a lot, I think.
No, I like it too. It's just it feels a little antiseptic sometimes, I guess. For me personally, but then I'm a guy who likes all sorts of rendering. I like to see the artist's kind of thumbprint on the page.
Yeah.
But like the opening shot we got here, it's like a big freaking panorama shot of the city that our hero here, Timmy Turbo, well, not our hero, our stand-in here, Timmy Turbo, is living in. Way on, I don't even know how high up this would be. This is like hundreds of stories up, I suppose. And you know, it's a very nice 1-point perspective shot that, you know, I think I could approximate if I really tried, but man, that would be a lot of trial and error, I think. And so yeah, the deal is that Timmy Turbo he's got his new Strongman of America package, which is kind of the equivalent of, there was always these fan clubs and stuff for Superman or, Marvel comics. They had the Merry Marvel Marching something. And, you get your button and your free comic and your newsletter and all that stuff, which you weren't getting in 1999, but Alan Moore grew up with that stuff, so he's kind of hearkening back to that. And so the framing device is, Timmy Turbo reading about, he's gotten his free origin story of Tom Strong, which is coincidentally also the story that we're getting in the comic here. So it's a pretty smart way of leading us into the story, I think.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Great way to do a first issue.
Oh, yeah. So the whole deal here, it sets us in the West Indies in 1899, and this Victorian inventor, Sinclair Strong, and his wife, he's taken them off to the lost island of Adabar Teru, which is, I'm not sure exactly why he needed to go there specifically, other than it's very remote. Did that get explained in the comic? Did I miss that?
There's something about, like, there's some rainbow.
It's guarded by rainbows, and I don't know what that means, but
yeah, I think he's seeking a place that's like super isolated, like that doesn't have any. And of course, he'll discover that there's people there, but like he wants to raise his Tom in like in a sort of state of isolation, right? So he's seeking the most like remote, like kind of forbidden place.
Yeah, we do find out that Sinclair has decided to perform an experiment where he tries to raise essentially a perfect human. And this is very much based off of Doc Savage, so the whole story with Doc Savage I'm aware of. I've never read a Doc Savage comic, but the whole deal with Doc Savage is that he was raised by his father and a team of scientists to become, like a polymath, one of the best people in the world kind of thing. So we're kind of going with that, and we're going to get a little bit of Tarzan origin mixed in as well. So very much relying on like the pulp era for Tom Strong, which is fun. So on the way to the island, the ship gets wrecked, and their one crew member, Thomas, all right, maybe their one crew member left, who knows, is crushed by the mast and killed. And so it's just Sinclair and his wife, Susan, who are left stranded on the island of Adabar Teru. And we get on the next page here a pretty sweet just view of what their initial landfall is. So this is How Tom Strong Got Started, Part 1, The Fabulous Island, written by Alan Moore, penciled by Chris Sprouse, inked by Al Gordon of Wildstar fame.
Famous.
Lettered, absolutely. Lettered by Todd Klein, who's only the best. And so Sinclair brings Susan aboard the island, and his first priority is to bring aboard all of his equipment, which has largely survived. And then, we should probably bring aboard Thomas's body as well, just to like honor him and stuff. And he's like, you were fond of him in your way, weren't you? And he's like, yes, in my way. And you get the impression that there's a bit more between the wife and Thomas than is really getting let on, but that doesn't really get delved into at this point.
It's very subtle. It's good writing because he doesn't hammer you,
No, not at all. Like it barely even makes mention of it, really. But you get the feeling that the relationship between Susan and Sinclair isn't. It's very Victorian in that it's not based on love so much as it's based on like just she's a fine wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, the whole thing with Thomas would get revisited. If you recall, when I originally tried to order Tom Strong #1, I accidentally got a copy of Tom Strong #20 because it has a very similar cover.
Yeah.
And what it actually is an alternate universe where instead of Thomas getting killed by the mast, Sinclair is. So Thomas and Susan have to survive on the island, and and they do the whole mirroring thing here, where they first land, where Sinclair is comforting his wife. Only this time it's Thomas comforting his wife, and then Thomas wades out to the water, and the first thing she says is like, "Imagine if it had been you instead of Sinclair." Like that's definitely she liked Thomas more than she liked Sinclair. So next page we get Susan grieving for Thomas, and you get the feeling that this is her having to put some closure to an aspect of her life. And meanwhile, Sinclair is busily assembling his newest invention, which is a pneumatic man, because this is Victorian times. We're getting all like clockwork with it. Steampunk, that's the word.
He's a steam calculator, which is kind of cool.
He's all running on wax cylinders and everything, which is great. And he's not really concerned about Thomas because he's got his own, his own stuff that he's very excited about. So yeah, we get New Man here, which is a fun design. It's very simplistic. It works very well for a Chris Sprouse, where he just doesn't have to throw a whole bunch of lines on there. He just gives us kind of the basics of this is what a pneumatic man looks like. It's like, yeah, actually that looks like it's probably pretty accurate. So yeah, Newman is set about the task of assembling a lean-to for them, and then he'll have to build them a new place to live once that's been constructed. And while Newman sets off to go collect supplies, resources, they're kind of marveling at this new life that they're going to have to live, and don't notice off in the background that they're being watched, that Adabar Taru is not as deserted as it initially appeared.
Yeah.
And I think, we don't jump back. I thought we jumped back to Timmy Turbo there. But the next point is a few months later when Newman has constructed them a new home in the bed of a dormant volcano. Very Swiss Family Robinson looking. And Sinclair's trying to he's like trying to be all, I guess this is dirty talk for Sinclair, where he's talking about you really are the perfect woman, combining as you do intelligence with physique that is, if I might say, delightful. It's like, oh, Sinclair, you're so scandalous. and at first she's like, she's resisting it. It's like, what, like out in the open, like wild animals? Okay, as far as they know, they're completely by themselves. There's nobody else for like hundreds of miles. But it's also Victorian, so yeah, you've got to be very reserved. Again, and just going back to Tom Strong #20, it's interesting because the deal there, because the point of the comic isn't Sinclair and Susan Strong, it's their offspring. Mm-hmm. In the parallel world, of course, it would be Thomas and Susan's offspring, but it's Susan who initiates it, and it's like on the first night. So it's not months later. So just, yeah. I don't know. I find that kind of fun. Next time we see them, it's during the night that Susan is giving birth to Tom. And Sinclair doesn't know what to do. He's not a medical doctor. He's an inventor. He's got textbooks and everything probably, but that doesn't really give him an idea what to do when the baby starts, it's coming out feet first. But luckily, they've been monitored this whole time by the other inhabitants of the island, which is the Ozu, which are apparently were a group of slaves that were marooned on the island and then just kind of took it over and developed their own civilization based off of there. And they're here as a benevolent force. They've been aware of the Strongs, and they've just kind of stayed away up until now, except that they can hear Susan's cries. And they know what the deal is, so they come in and they're going to basically save the day. They're going to help deliver Tom healthily, without any danger to the baby or the mother. And that's where the opening chapter ends with Tom Strong, being born. And it's interesting, you don't usually get the birth of your hero, but it works in this context where it's very biographical.
Yeah.
And then we get more of that framing device as we go back to Timmy Turbo. He's very wrapped up in his new comic. So wrapped up that he doesn't notice when the cable car that he's riding in gets hijacked by what are they called?
Blimp bandits.
There you go. Doesn't notice it throughout the entire attack. There's an interesting technology in Tom Strong that isn't quite futuristic, where the buildings are all massive. They're all hundreds of stories tall. We've got some advancements here and there, but actually for the most part, it's all kind of it's as though it's like a branching technology from the past, where they based a lot of stuff off of like the Blimp Bandits for one thing. It's kind of Zeppelin-y.
Yeah.
And you see a fair few Zeppelins like in the background.
Yeah, it's a little bit like The Incredibles, where there's a kind of, it's this sort of Art Deco kind of modernist sort of sci-fi future, but it's not, it's on the terms of a, a steam powered world or something. Like it's a different, it's an older, it's a kind of a future of the past.
Yes, that was what I was just thinking, where it's more like what the 40s would have envisioned the future to be like, instead of what futuristic technology would theoretically evolve.
Again, you've got these there's a lot of repetition in these Timmy panels, which give you that cartoon feel.
Yes, like an animation feel.
Yeah. And I love the Blimp Bandits too. It's a great, he just throws that word out there. He doesn't explain what they are. You just know immediately, oh, this is a form of criminal in this world, and they basically like rob the blimps because that's the thing to rob.
Yep. And they're all like ratty looking and everything. And you don't really need to explain anything with the Blimp Bandits. And so the passengers on the cable car aren't really able to fend them off, but to the rescue comes Tom Strong. Very nice, very heavily shadowed reveal of him, which we're not going to see a ton of because like Chris Sprouse is pretty sparse with his shadows. So this is just for dramatic effect in this case, and it works very nicely. And they just kind of disappear from view, and Timmy still isn't really paying attention. Yeah, we get that repeated kind of animation feel at the bottom of the page there. It's good stuff. And so now we're going to cut back to what he's reading, what has him so kind of involved and just to the point where he can't pay attention. So back to the origin of Tom Strong. This is 1903, so this is 4 years later on Adabar Teru. And they've got this whole compound built that Newman has built for Sinclair and Susan. Since the birth of Tom, they've been in constant contact, and I get the feeling that Sinclair has he definitely sees them as having some value, but they're kind of secondary to the experiment. That's definitely his paramount interest. But he has adopted a couple of things from the Ozu. And they've got this whole tank that's set up in the bed of the volcano. And that is actually where they're keeping young Tom Strong. Because part of the experiment, in addition to trying to raise him to be one of the most intelligent people on Earth, they're also trying to bring him to like peak physical form.
Mm-hmm.
So they've kind of ensconced him in this heightened gravity. He says on the previous page, what is it? Like a mere 5 gravities is well within a small biped's capacity. I've tried it out on hens. They've thrived on it. So yeah, he's subjected his son to 5 times regular gravity in order to build up his strength. And in the result of that, of course, is that Tom Strong has never actually been in physical contact with his parents, but that isn't Sinclair's concern. Again, it's very Doc Savage, I think.
Yeah, I guess a little bit of I got shades of Superman too, because Superman doesn't Krypton like have more intense gravity planet or something?
Yeah, there's that. And I mean, also similarly, I mean, I guess it's kind of common for heroes in that era, the pulp era, to just be orphans or to not really be have any kind of closeness with their parents, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true. She's sort of gesturing towards all those old kind of yeah, to all those tropes from the early years, right?
Yeah. And yeah, so the only thing that he's really in contact with, who can, interact with him, is Newman, which makes sense because I mean, if Sinclair or Susan tried to go down there, they'd get crushed. Susan is, she's happy about Tom's progress because he's a very bright boy and everything. He seems very happy, but she's never touched him, and that's kind of the big thing for her. And Sinclair is like, oh, there'll be plenty of time for that when he's 11. And that's when he calculates that he should be ready to emerge. And I don't have a ton to say about the art of this. It's all just kind of, yeah, perfect. Like there's no hatching. There's no all the perspective works perfectly. It's just a style I can't relate to that is done extremely well.
Well, it helps if helps if you're Alan Moore's the one writing it, because I think the art it disappears a little bit, and you just the story carries you forward, and that's not necessarily a terrible thing. Like sometimes, if you're always noticing the style, it's taking you out of the story. So
that's true.
It serves the narrative really well.
No, I agree with that. It's interesting compared to something like Top 10. I don't know if you ever read much of Top 10.
No, I don't think so.
That's based off of NYPD Blue, because that's what was big at the time, right? So Super Team, that's more of a police procedural, and it's drawn by Gene Ha, who has a much busier style. Like it's like the opposite of this, where he's tucking detail in every corner, and it seems much more. You get that busy New York feel. I think that was kind of the point of that. So when Sinclair and Susan want to go down and visit Tom, they can. They just have to wear these pressurized suits that keep them safe. Yeah, so then the next thing we're going to cut to is 1908, where there's an earthquake. And, Sinclair Strong, he's a very intelligent guy, but he didn't foresee that could be a problem setting up his compound in the bed of a dormant volcano.
I don't know. I would have thought, I feel like you're courting disaster there, but, what do I know?
I don't know. I mean, like, does he know anything about this particular volcano? Like, is there the possibility it could erupt? Like, he almost got lucky, really, that it was an earthquake.
Yeah, I guess so.
So yeah, we cut to the interior of the volcano here. It's just all wreckage everywhere. The entire compound has been destroyed. Sinclair is dead by the opening to the hatch, and Susan is still alive, but barely. She can't feel anything. And her first concern, of course, is for her son, and the hatch bursts open. And we don't even see him at first, which is great. He's just silhouetted. So you get this like alien feel almost. And the only thing at this point she just wants to hold him, because that's the only thing that she's ever really wanted, and she's never been able to do because of her husband. So she gets to hold her son, but just before she dies. So that's something, at least. And the Ozu go up to investigate, and right when they're getting close to the top, this giant boulder goes flying over. So that's a fun bit. And then, Tom comes over the side of it, carrying his parents over his shoulders. He's like 8 years old at this point, so I guess theoretically he wasn't fully baked, because he was supposed to stay in there till he was 11. But he seems to be fairly well developed.
It's funny because I'm looking at the hardcover, so there's no ads, and you get the reveal of him on the page turn, where you don't get that in the in your comic. So it has a little bit more impact, actually.
I imagine it would, yeah.
They must have planned for that, and then of course the ads fucked it up.
Probably. There's a bunch in here. It's a DC publication.
Yeah.
It's all about Gex 3. That fucked everything up. So back to Timmy Turbo, because we want to keep reminding you about this framing device, and the framing device is going to factor into the entire overall story, so that's appropriate. Very upset by the way the story has turned out. And he's just like, a poor kid. I wonder how he made out. Meanwhile, on top of his cable car, Tom Strong is punching out all the blimp bandits. So it's like, I think he probably did okay. And it's very kind of cartoon action. It's not trying to be, grim and gritty in any kind of way. We get like stars coming out when Tom Strong makes contact. He's got like the little floating birds and shit when he's like woozy. And the big move that Tom Strong does is when the blimp bandit is going to go and fire his harpoon, Tom Strong directs the harpoon at that bandit's blimp, and he goes kind of flying all over the place as the air is let out. And then Tom Strong goes in his rotor backpack to go and rescue him and save the day.
I love those. I love the panels. He's running away and then he sort of jumps. Like it's just well done.
Yeah, the movement feels very fluid. Like it doesn't feel like there's anything off there. And yeah, we're getting a lot of those very similar panels. And just kind of, it all has a very animation feel to it.
Yeah, it's terrific. I dig it.
Yeah. No, me too. I mean, like, I haven't looked at this in years now, so it's definitely been fun going over it. And everybody on the cable car is celebrating, like, what a guy, he's the best and all that. And Timmy, of course, is just like, you guys are interrupting my comic book. Can you guys keep it down, please? So next, we're going to turn to Adabar Teru again in 1921. So we've got a 21-year-old Tom Strong who set up a generator now in the bed of the volcano. And he's done some renovating where he's built it as a proper, more modern compound. Everything is lit up with the help of Newman, I would assume. But he would, of course, be in contact with the Ozu all the time at this point as well. And so he's pretty much the character he's going to be, kind of like a young Doc Savage type. And so with all of his learning out of the way now, because I guess it would have been intervening like 12, 14 years, something like that. He's finished all of his education as well as he can based off of his father's notes and based off of what he's learned off of the Ozu. So now it's time for him to kind of part ways and go and try and integrate himself into Western culture. So he's going to sail back to Millennium City. There's a bit here at the end where he's parting from the tribe, and young Dalawa, who's the chief's daughter, is sad that he's going. And, it's, oh, yeah, no, I'm sad too. She's like a sister to me. And he goes off on his pontoon boat. And again, we get the similarity with the backgrounds and where the tribe is waving him off. And then later on where Dalawa is the only one staying on the beach watching where he's sailed off from. I guess there's also a method to having in addition to having that animation kind of feel, it's also efficient in that you can lightbox that background over and over again and not have to work everything out.
It's also just great storytelling because there's no, it's a wordless panel and immediately, oh, she has a thing for him.
Yes.
So just great economy, great, just concise storytelling.
No, yeah, I agree with that. And now we're going to get just kind of snippets of the rest of Tom Strong's life leading up to modern day. I mean, a lot of the Tom Strong comic is going to be revisiting old adventures anyway. The idea is that we're kind of jumping into an already existing comic book, and then every once in a while, hey, here's the Modular Man back. Here's Phil Savine back. All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, 1963 had that energy too. It was kind of fun because if you think about all the classic Marvel comics, you're sort of starting, Peter Parker gets bitten right away and the mythology is built.
Yeah.
And I think Alan Moore has a lot of fun basically plunging you into a mythology and there's a fan
theoretically
club,
already exists.
there's a
Yeah.
deep history, there's villains, there's a million things that have already happened, and it's really it's just really pleasurable to read. Like,
Yeah. No, and I mean it feels like more of a common trope these days to do that in media race kind of thing. But I don't know. I feel like it wasn't quite as common in
no,
'99.
it was fresh. I think it was this was a very unique comic at the time.
Yeah. So what we're doing here is we're cutting to more modern day. Tom Strong is still reasonably young at this time, probably in his 30s or 40s, and he's having a face-off with Paul Savine. That's it. Who is basically his nemesis. We get a very like Sherlock Holmes Moriarty kind of confrontation. Apparently, the whole deal with Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty, apparently they had their final fight. It was atop a waterfall or something, and they both fall into the water. Where Paul Savine is threatening to destroy the city. Tom Strong does a leap, knocks him off the tower that they're on, and the bomb blows up in the water. Tom Strong radios Newman to come pick him up. He figures Paul Savine is finally dead, and he's got other business that he can attend to now that the Savine thing is taken care of. And the business at hand is that he's got to go back and marry Dalawa. So he's maintained his ties with the Ozu in the meantime, and their relationship has grown. All that kind of stuff. Again, interesting in issue 20, because the whole deal with Tom Stone, which is the protagonist in that one, he goes away, he meets Paul Savine, and him and Paul Savine end up actually being friends, and he becomes more, I don't like a starlet kind of thing, like he's more of a celebrity. And by the time he gets back to Adabar Teru, he already has women hanging off of him, so Dalawa doesn't actually hook up with him. She hooks up with Paul Savine instead. And it's that, it's that kind of alternate universe stuff that, And on their wedding night, Tom Strong is talking about how, he was thinking it would be nice to bring more intelligent life into this beautiful world. Just think, a companion who could talk to us, the patter of little feet. And Dalloway, of course, gets very excited and says, "Oh yes, of course, I absolutely wanted a baby all this time." It's like, "Oh yes, I was actually thinking about performing innovative brain experiments on a monkey, but a baby would be fun too." So he's got a little bit of that Sinclair coldness to him, just a little bit, where he's not always 100% thinking of just the way a regular person would, I think.
Yeah. And
then we cut to Adabar Teru in 1999, which is very modern. You still have kind of the Ozu huts, but the Ozu are also wearing Nike branded T-shirts and everything, and they've got headphones and all that. So they're integrated. The compound in the volcano has been built up to like stadium sized, and Tom Strong has he's got his whole family with him now. So it's him and Dalawa as the parents, and Tesla is their daughter. They've also got their monkey man in Solomon, and Newman is still sticking around. I believe his circuits the wax cylinders get replaced with circuits eventually, and they kind of wave us out here in a nice group shot splash. That all looks pretty great. And that works pretty great as an origin. Like, it's maybe, I don't know, what is it, like 12 to 16 pages of just welcome to the Tom Strong family, that kind of thing. And, Timmy Turbo gets off the cable car, and he's very happy with his new membership. Doesn't notice all the reporters gathering around it who were reporting about the amazing rescue that was performed by Tom Strong, and he doesn't know anything about that anyway. And then as he's walking to the Laundry Street School, again, like very animated, like almost Peanuts kind of animation. He walks right by Tom Strong, who welcomes him to the club as member 2059, and doesn't recognize him until he's already gone. And yeah, we get a holy socks, because that's his catchphrase. And then next month, we'll feature the return of the Modular Man, because again, we're in media res. And there's our cover for that.
It's such a great first issue. Like there, like
It's kind of perfect.
it's kind of perfect. Like the frame narrative is terrific. It's a nice lead
Yeah.
in. You get a pretty, you get a solid origin that
Mhm.
also gestures at all this mythology,
Yep.
which
It sets a perfect tone.
sets a great tone. It's also just like, again, I come at it with my writer's hat on of like, it's so economical. Like he just does it, even where it shows that modern day version of the island. The guy's got the Nike logo on his shirt,
Yeah.
like it's just,
It's one panel that shows, this is where Adabar Taru is these days. You get the feeling it's still isolated, but it is also very much aware of the world around it and is not completely cut off or anything.
yeah. I mean, it's just he like so much is done in this comic, but it doesn't have. I love the Prime era more stuff from the 80s, but a lot of that stuff is so dense.
Yeah.
And what I quite liked about I really love the Tom Strong series. What I like about it is he's a lot is happening, but it's actually quite breezy, like the story.
Yeah.
It really moves. Part of it, I think, is those long. Sprouse uses those long horizontal panels,
Yeah.
and that he uses that quite often, and I find that creates a lot of air, and it just like the story just unfolds at a nice pace.
Yeah.
It never condescends to you. All the dialogue feels kind of essential.
Yeah.
Um, just a great first issue.
No, I agree. And the comic itself is very much like it has that thing where you can pick up any issue, and you might be in the middle of a story, but the issue in itself is self-contained, and you don't have to worry too much about whatever details you need. They'll catch you up on. This story can be enjoyed on its own, as its own adventure.
Yeah, it's totally satisfying.
Yeah.
The other thing I really quite like about Tom Strong is, and this is something I think Moore has always done throughout his whole history, is that he's really like, there's something almost generic about Tom Strong. Like he's
Yeah.
not, you know, it's not like he's not some radically different character. Like, and I've often found, Moore sort of did that with the Watchmen characters in a sense. Like he
Mhm.
took these generic old, I don't know, they were like Charlton characters basically, and
Right.
he kind of just sort of tweaked them slightly. But
Yeah.
he's always taking. I find he has this great talent for taking like unpromising material and like
Mhm.
really elevating it. Like he did that with Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing was this sort of like failing book, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at something like Tom Strong, it's like this kind of Doc Savage, Superman-esque guy with a robot and a monkey, and it's these are not like radically innovative ideas, but it's what he does with them.
Well, no, I mean they're all homages to something else, really.
Yeah, but it's awesome because it always, I find it inspiring as someone who writes, because it's like, it's not so much about the idea, it's like it's how you execute it, it's what you
Yeah.
do with it, and that's kind of it's sort of refreshing in a sense.
Well, I think that's been Alan Moore's whole thing for his entire career. Has been, yeah, just taking existing ideas and properties. Like he's got a couple of things here and there. I don't know what the deal is with big numbers and a small killing. I guess From Hell is it's definitely very ambitious, but a lot of his bibliography is taking existing properties or ideas and just kind of putting a more interesting spin on them, or just what if this happened instead?
Yeah, for sure.
Like that Swamp Thing, that's Watchmen, that, and like just kind of going through the list, all of the ABC stuff.
Miracle Man.
Yep. Neonomicon is all based off of. I know you're not familiar with it, but that's all based off of H.P. Lovecraft's work, and finding a way to all integrate it with each other and tell a satisfying narrative over 12 issues as well.
Yeah,
And like I feel like that kind of challenge is one of the things that really appeals to Alan Moore, is just, can I even do this and make it's something that can be successful?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's just super inspiring. Like I always, the things that what I get from Alan Moore is not maybe necessarily what other people get. I just love the way the characters are almost beside the point, like it's how he breathes fresh life and puts a crackle of energy into these really stale old things. I always find that so impressive.
Yeah, yeah. From a writer's perspective, it's. I mean, I guess it's very easy a lot of the time to kind of, you develop your style, you develop your tropes that work for you, and the things that you can be successful with. And it's like, okay, now I just gotta find different ways to disguise this as something new over and over again. Like, how many writers do that?
Yeah.
And Alan Moore, he'll do that from time to time, but for the most part, yeah, he keeps trying to find new ground, I think.
Yeah, even if you look at Tom Strong's like costume, like it's so basic. It's just that that triangle, though it gives you that, it emphasizes like a big, broad-chested superhero, but it's generic, right? And it's totally fine, like, because it doesn't matter.
No, absolutely not. And it just, the look itself, it is kind of a callback to the pulp era. You think of like Superman's early costume, and it's very basic, or Batman, any of those original kind of characters. Doc Savage himself, they didn't go for very elaborate looks because it wasn't necessary. They kind of went more for like a unique look that would stand out. And there wasn't a huge amount of competition. You could do that, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty much it for Tom Strong. I mean, it's a great comic. I might come back and revisit the odd issue here and there. The only thing is that I don't have much to talk about in terms of the art, so it just ends up being kind of a discussion about the story, which is, or not even a discussion. Sometimes it's just kind of a narration, which is sometimes fun in itself. But we'll see what goes on there. But I think that's pretty much going to do it for this one. Thanks for coming over on this one, Jay.
Total delight.
Yeah, and and thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notification so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe on my Patreon. Gives you early access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions, and you can join the Blood Force Discord server. Yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.